In the town of Riverton, a 16-year-old gymnast named Emma Collins was a beacon of talent and dedication. She had spent nearly a decade honing her skills, her passion for gymnastics ignited at a young age and nurtured by her supportive family. Emma's parents recognized her potential early on and enrolled her in the local gymnastics club, where she quickly rose through the ranks, impressing coaches and peers alike with her natural ability and relentless work ethic. Emma's coach, Paul Jennings, played a significant role in her journey. In his early 40s, Paul had a reputation for being one of the best gymnastics coaches in the region. With a background as a competitive gymnast himself, he had transitioned into coaching after a career-ending injury. Paul was respected and admired for his technical expertise and his ability to motivate his students to reach their full potential. His relationship with Emma was one of mutual respect and admiration. He saw in her the promise of a champion. Paul Jennings had moved to Riverton with his wife, Lisa, 5 years earlier. Their marriage had been strong at first, but over the years it had begun to show signs of strain. The couple had struggled with infertility, a challenge that had placed significant emotional and psychological stress on their relationship. Paul buried himself in his work, spending more time at the gym and less time at home, where the atmosphere had grown tense and distant. Emma, on the other hand, was in the prime of her teenage years, balancing school, social life, and an intense training schedule. She was well-liked among her peers for her friendly demeanor and admired for her dedication. Her dream was to compete at the national level, and, under Paul's guidance, she was making significant strides towards that goal. Paul had always been supportive, pushing her to excel while also providing the necessary encouragement during tough times. Their coach-student relationship was initially professional and focused solely on gymnastics. Emma saw Paul as a mentor and a father figure, especially since her own father had passed away when she was young. Paul's guidance filled a void in her life, and she trusted him implicitly. He would often stay late to help her perfect a routine, or give her extra tips to improve her performance. These late sessions, though, were always conducted with a sense of propriety and respect. The early years of their relationship were marked by significant achievements. Emma's skills improved rapidly under Paul's tutelage, and she began to win local competitions, gaining recognition within the gymnastics community. Paul took pride in her accomplishments, often highlighting her as an example to the other students. He was meticulous in his coaching, ensuring that Emma not only excelled in her routines, but also understood the importance of discipline, resilience, and hard work. However, as Emma's abilities grew, so did Paul's personal troubles. His marriage to Lisa continued to deteriorate, with frequent arguments and long periods of silence becoming the norm at home. The emotional distance between them widened, and Paul found himself seeking solace in his work and in the company of his students, particularly Emma. He began to spend even more time at the gym, often using Emma's training as an excuse to avoid going home. It was during this period of personal turmoil that Paul's behavior towards Emma began to change subtly. What were once purely professional gestures started to take on a different tone. He became more affectionate, often praising her not just for her athletic prowess, but for her appearance and maturity. Emma, who had always craved approval and support, initially welcomed the attention, not fully understanding the shift in dynamics. The turning point in their relationship came during a week-long training camp that required overnight stays. These camps were a regular part of their preparation for major competitions, designed to provide intensive training without the distractions of daily life. Emma had always looked forward to these camps, seeing them as opportunities to improve her skills and bond with her teammates. During one of these camps, Paul began visiting Emma's room under the pretext of discussing her training progress. Initially, these visits seemed harmless. He would offer advice, review her routines, and talk about her goals. However, as the nights progressed, Paul's visits became more frequent and prolonged. He started to sit closer, his hand lingering on her shoulder or knee longer than necessary. Emma felt a growing discomfort but brushed it off, convincing herself that Paul was just being supportive. As Emma continued to excel, Paul's admiration for her turned into an unhealthy obsession. His personal life in shambles, he began to project his emotional needs onto her, blurring the lines between mentor and something far more insidious. Emma, focused on her dream and unaware of the depths of Paul's intentions, remained oblivious to the full extent of the changes in their relationship. As Emma turned 17, the subtle changes in Paul's behavior became more pronounced and increasingly inappropriate. What started as seemingly harmless compliments evolved into suggestive comments about her appearance and maturity. Emma felt a growing sense of discomfort, but she was caught in a bind. Paul was not only her coach, but also the person she relied on most to achieve her dreams in gymnastics. The fear of jeopardizing her career kept her silent. Paul's personal life continued to unravel as his marriage to Lisa deteriorated further. The arguments at home became more frequent and intense, leaving him emotionally drained. Paul began to lean on Emma more, seeking solace in their training sessions. What once was a professional relationship started to cross boundaries. He began to touch her in ways that made her uncomfortable, lingering hugs and hands on her shoulders that felt increasingly invasive. Emma's anxiety grew with each passing day. The gym, once her sanctuary, now felt like a place of dread. Her performance started to decline as the mental and emotional toll of Paul's harassment took its toll. She struggled to focus during training, her mind constantly preoccupied with the fear of what might happen next. Paul's advances were becoming bolder, and she felt more isolated than ever. The situation escalated significantly during a week-long training camp, a crucial preparation period for an upcoming major competition. Paul's visits to Emma's room became a nightly routine. Initially, he used the pretext of discussing her performance and offering advice. But as the nights wore on, his intentions became clearer. He would sit closer to her, his touch lingering longer than necessary. Emma felt trapped and powerless, unsure of how to stop the escalating harassment without facing severe repercussions. One night, Paul's behavior crossed the line. He entered her room late, clearly agitated from another fight with Lisa. As he spoke about his troubles, he moved closer, eventually sitting on the edge of her bed. His hands found their way to her shoulders, and before Emma could react, he kissed her forcefully. Shocked and terrified, she pushed him away, but Paul persisted, his actions becoming more aggressive. The harassment had turned into outright abuse, leaving Emma traumatized and confused. The turning point came during another training camp, shortly after Emma's 18th birthday. By now, Paul's advances had become a regular occurrence, and Emma felt completely helpless. The abuse was no longer confined to subtle touches and suggestive comments. It had escalated to physical assaults that left Emma feeling violated and terrified. She dreaded the training camps, knowing they provided Paul with more opportunities to isolate and abuse her. During this particular camp, Emma's close friend and fellow gymnast, Sarah Mitchell, became increasingly worried about her. Sarah had noticed the changes in Emma's behavior, her withdrawn demeanor, the frequent mistakes in her routines, and the visible fear in her eyes. Determined to find out what was wrong, Sarah decided to keep a closer eye on her friend. One night, Sarah couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk around the training facility. As she passed by Emma's room, she heard muffled voices and what sounded like a struggle. Concerned, she quietly approached the door and peered through the small crack left ajar. What she saw made her blood run cold. Paul was in the room with Emma, his hands on her in a way that was unmistakably abusive. Emma's attempts to push him away were futile against his overpowering grip. Sarah's immediate reaction was one of horror and anger. She quickly retreated to her room, heart pounding, unsure of what to do next. The image of Emma being abused was seared into her mind. She knew she had to help her friend, but the fear of not being believed or causing further harm to Emma held her back momentarily. However, her loyalty to Emma and her moral compass spurred her into action. The next morning, Sarah confronted Emma, gently coaxing her to open up about what had been happening. Emma, initially reluctant and terrified, broke down and recounted the months of harassment and the recent abuse. Sarah listened with a mix of fury and compassion, assuring Emma that she was not alone and that they needed to take action to stop Paul. Determined to protect Emma and prevent Paul from harming anyone else, Sarah encouraged Emma to report the abuse to the authorities. She promised to stand by her every step of the way. Gathering her courage, Emma agreed. Together, they went to the police station and detailed the harassment and assaults Emma had endured. The officers took their statements seriously, and an investigation was launched immediately. With the support of her friend Sarah and the backing of the local police, Emma devised a plan to address the conflict and bring Paul to justice. Emma's first step was to gather as much evidence as possible to support her claims. She went through her messages, emails, and any other form of communication she had with Paul, looking for anything that could serve as proof of his inappropriate behavior. Emma also wrote down detailed accounts of each incident of harassment and abuse, noting the dates, times, and locations. Sarah, being the strong-willed and proactive friend she was, reached out to other gymnasts discreetly. She asked if anyone else had experienced similar behavior from Paul or if they had noticed anything suspicious. Slowly, a few brave souls came forward, sharing their own unsettling encounters and suspicions. Their testimonies added weight to Emma's claims and helped build a stronger case against Paul. Emma's next move was to seek legal advice. With Sarah's help, she contacted a lawyer who specialized in cases of sexual harassment and abuse. The lawyer, empathetic and experienced, guided Emma through the legal process. They discussed the importance of being prepared for a trial, understanding the legal proceedings, and the potential challenges they might face from Paul's defense. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation, interviewing gymnasts, parents, and staff at the gymnastics club. They collected testimonies and gathered evidence, building a solid case against Paul. Emma and Sarah worked closely with the investigators, providing any information they could to ensure that Paul would be held accountable for his actions. The climax of the story arrived with the start of the trial. The courtroom was packed with supporters, journalists, and curious onlookers, all eager to see justice served. The atmosphere was tense as the judge called the court to order and the proceedings began. Emma's lawyer presented a compelling case, starting with Emma's own testimony. She stood before the court, her voice steady but filled with emotion, recounting the harassment and abuse she had endured. She described in detail how Paul's behavior had changed, how his advances had escalated, and how she had felt trapped and powerless. Her heartfelt testimony moved many in the courtroom, highlighting the courage it took for her to come forward. Sarah was the next to testify. She described the incident she had witnessed at the training camp, providing a vivid account of Paul's abusive behavior. Her testimony was crucial in corroborating Emma's claims, adding credibility to the case. Sarah's determination and unwavering support for Emma were evident, and her words left a significant impact on everyone present. Other gymnasts and witnesses followed, each sharing their own experiences and observations. The pattern of Paul's predatory behavior became clear, painting a damning picture of a man who had abused his position of power for far too long. The prosecution's case was strong, bolstered by the collective testimonies of brave young women who had decided to stand up against their abuser. Paul's defense attempted to discredit Emma and the other witnesses, suggesting that they had misinterpreted his actions or were seeking attention. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies were consistent, and the emotional impact on the victims was undeniable. The defense's arguments fell flat in the face of such compelling evidence. The climax reached its peak when Paul himself took the stand. Under cross-examination, his attempts to justify his actions only served to further incriminate him. His demeanor, once confident and authoritative, crumbled under the weight of the evidence and the scrutiny of the court. The truth of his actions was laid bare for all to see. The jury's deliberation was brief. The evidence against Paul was overwhelming, and the verdict was clear. Paul Jennings was found guilty on multiple counts of sexual harassment and abuse. The judge sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, ensuring that he would no longer pose a threat to any young gymnast. The resolution brought a sense of justice and closure to Emma and the other victims. Emma felt a weight lifted from her shoulders, knowing that her courage had not only brought her abuser to justice, but had also protected others from suffering the same fate. The gymnastics club underwent significant changes, implementing stricter policies and oversight to ensure the safety and well-being of all its athletes.